I swear, Margot couldn't organize a sock drawer without help, my husband chuckled, clapping his buddy on the back. 3 men burst out laughing as I stood frozen in the doorway, a tray of snacks trembling in my hands. He turned, smirked, and added, "She's practically useless, but at least she makes a good dip." I smiled politely, set the tray down, and walked away without a word. But once in the hallway, I unlocked the drawer. Inside, a thick envelope, a USB drive, and a notarized document. He thinks I'm nothing, but soon they'll all know the truth. Before we continue, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Comment below. Before the gallery openings, before the whispers of collectors asking for me by name, I was just Mrs. Tom Braddock, wife, mother, cook, errand runner, ghost. I used to be someone else. I was 22 when I met Tom. I still remember the way he held eye contact when he asked for my name, as if he already knew it, as if speaking it out loud gave him permission to own it. I was in art school, fresh from a small town, and he was everything my parents warned me about: confident, fast-talking, older by almost 10 years, and always dressed like he was already successful. But oh, how he made me feel seen. He said I had the kind of eyes that looked like they'd been hurt just right. Back then, that sounded poetic. Now? I understand it was a man drawn to broken things because they don't fight back. He talked about potential. Not mine, his. His dreams, his investments, his long hours that would pay off one day. I believed him. So when he asked me to put off my final year of school so we could move for his promotion, I didn't hesitate. I was in love. And love, at that age, feels like a promise written in stone. At first, it wasn't bad. We were a team, or so I thought. I worked part-time and painted at night. He'd come home exhausted, always with stories of difficult meetings and brilliant business plays. He loved being admired, and I loved making him proud. But slowly, the compliments turned into critiques. "You waste so much time on those little sketches. Why don't you try painting something people actually want to hang on their walls? You're lucky you don't have to worry about money. Most women would kill for that." Pregnancy brought more change. Our son, Dean, was a light in the middle of a very gray room. I devoted everything to raising him. Tom provided financially, but emotionally, he was absent, except when it came to discipline. That was his domain. And when Dean started pulling away from him as a teenager, Tom blamed me for raising a soft boy. I started shrinking. Every year, a little more. Less makeup, less laughter, fewer calls to old friends, no more painting, just laundry, grocery lists, and wondering when exactly my voice had stopped mattering. People say abuse has to leave bruises to be real, but I've learned that the deepest scars come from being made to feel like a burden in your own home. Once, Tom threw a dinner party for his colleagues. I spent 2 days preparing the meal, cleaning the house until my hands were raw. After the guests left, he muttered, "You're lucky you don't have to do real work like the rest of us." I didn't cry that night. I just stared at myself in the mirror and asked, what am I even for? It was that question, the ache of it, that led me back to the garage where I'd stored my old sketchbooks in a dusty plastic bin labeled college stuff. The first one I opened had a note from my art professor inside. "You see the world in a way that others can feel. Don't waste that." I held that page for over an hour, sitting cross-legged on the concrete floor, hands trembling, as if just touching it might shatter the glass I'd been living behind. That night, when Tom went to bed, I stayed up. I set up a small table in the corner of the guest room. I sharpened a pencil, and I drew. For the first time in over 20 years, it was like breathing again. I didn't tell anyone. It became my secret place, my evening escape. Within months, I'd taught myself how to scan and digitize my work. I opened an anonymous account online under the name A.M. Grayson, a tribute to my grandmother's maiden name. My pieces started selling, first small prints, then custom commissions. Tom never asked why I suddenly seemed more alert, why I smiled when I was alone, why my eyes had stopped looking so empty, because to him I was already finished, a wife past her prime, a houseplant he forgot to water but still expected to bloom. But I was changing, quietly, steadily, and he didn't see a thing. The day I sold my first $500 print, I cried alone in the laundry room, because for the first time in decades, I didn't feel like a ghost. I felt real. The Braddock house looks perfect from the outside. 2 stories, manicured lawn, white shutters, a porch swing that hasn't moved in years. But inside, everything revolved around Tom. He was the kind of man who kept a wall calendar with every game night, business trip, and golf outing color-coded, yet forgot his own anniversary 3 years in a row. If I ever reminded him, he'd say, "Oh, come on, you know I'm terrible with dates. You're the sentimental one, not me." He wasn't cruel in the way that makes people gasp. He was cruel in the way that makes you question yourself. Comments like, "You'd be dangerous if you had any ambition. You're too sensitive. It was just a joke. Don't take it so personally. You know how guys talk." Tom had a way of turning every jab into your problem. And I was always the audience to his little performances, especially during poker nights. That night, when he called me useless, wasn't the first. It was just the most public. He didn't know I'd heard the time he told his friend Gary, "Margot's harmless. She gave up on herself years ago." Didn't know I'd found the receipt for a necklace, one he never gave me. Didn't know I'd seen the texts to a woman named Leslie, saved under contractor. But I kept quiet. Because by then, I wasn't just enduring him. I was outgrowing him. My art was no longer a whisper in the dark. It had become a living, breathing entity. I had over 40,000 followers on social media, an anonymous identity that collectors adored. My style was described as haunting, fiercely feminine, tender with a blade inside. I sold limited edition prints that sold out within minutes. And the drawer? The drawer had become my fortress. Inside, I kept everything that mattered, a passport renewed in my maiden name, copies of financial transactions from art sales totaling just over $178,000, a prepaid phone used only for business contacts, and most importantly, a letter from a prominent gallery in New York asking if A.M. Grayson would consider a private showing. I reread that letter constantly. My evenings were spent sketching, replying to messages from buyers, curating collections, and learning how to negotiate contracts. I watched videos on self-promotion, licensing, copyright. I studied other women who had reinvented themselves later in life. I realized something that terrified me at first. I was smart, and I had let him convince me otherwise. Tom never once asked about the packages that arrived marked fragile. Never noticed the framed canvas I added to the guest room. Never even wondered why I was smiling in my sleep. One evening, he came, home annoyed that his favorite whiskey was missing. "Jesus, Margot, what do you do all day?" "I'll pick some up tomorrow." "You say that every time. Honestly, what would you be without me?" I didn't respond, just gave a soft smile and walked away. But that night, I made 2 big decisions. I would accept the gallery's offer. For the private show, I would attend under my real name, not A.M. Grayson, not Mrs. Braddock, just Margot Elaine Grayson, the woman I was always meant to be. And if that meant secrets, so be it. I had learned from the best. Tom was a professional at hiding things. The only difference? My secrets were beautiful. The same man who used to laugh at my doodles would soon see my name in lights, while his own spotlight quietly dimmed into irrelevance. The more I reclaimed myself, the more Tom tried to shrink me back down. He didn't know why I had started wearing lipstick again, or why I took walks at sunset with a little bounce in my step. He just knew something was changing, and he hated it. "You going somewhere?" he asked one Saturday evening, eyeing the scarf I tied around my hair. "No," I smiled. "Just felt like dressing like someone I like." He laughed. "Well, make sure she remembers to take the trash out. It's your turn. There it was again, that backhanded cruelty. The kind you almost laugh at until you realize it was never meant to be funny. A week later, at another one of his poker nights, I overheard the beginning of a sentence that gutted me. She used to be beautiful, you know, back when she cared. The words slipped through the floor vent and wrapped around my ribs like wire. I didn't hear the rest. I didn't have to. The laughter from his friends was confirmation enough. I waited until they left, cleaned up every glass, every crumb. Took his empty beer bottle and held it for a moment, staring at my reflection in the brown glass. Then I walked to the garage and started a new piece, a large one. Bigger than anything I'd attempted before, an abstract portrait of a woman in reds and golds, her hands open, mouth stitched shut, eyes burning like fire. I titled it, Unburied. That night, I got a message from an art collector in San Francisco asking if it would be for sale. I replied, yes, it will be ready soon. Days later, my son Dean called out of the blue. My heart skipped. Hey, Mom, he said, a little sheepish. I saw something today. Someone shared your art. Online. Said it reminded them of their mom. And I knew it was you. I froze. My throat tightened. You're not mad? I asked. Mad, Mom? I'm proud of you. It had been years since I felt that kind of warmth from him. Years since I didn't feel like an afterthought. I didn't tell Tom about the call. I didn't tell him about the art show being confirmed, or that I had a plane ticket booked to New York, or that my work had been selected as the centerpiece of the private gallery opening. What I did tell him was that I needed a weekend away to visit an old friend. He didn't even ask who, just grunted and muttered something about not forgetting to stock the fridge before I left. That's how little he thought of me. That's how invisible I had become. But I knew. I knew that in 3 weeks I'd be standing in a gallery with white wine in my hand, surrounded by people who admired me, not as a wife or mother or sidekick, but as Margot Grayson. The artist. The woman who created emotion out of silence, rage out of restraint. Still, the universe has a way of testing you right before you rise. 2 days before the flight, Tom came home in a foul mood. Some deal had fallen through. He needed a punching bag, and I was always within reach. Dinner's cold, he muttered. You're late, I said without flinching. He slammed his fist on the table. You're lucky I don't expect more from you. You couldn't handle real pressure. You'd crumble in a second. I stood, quietly, walked into the kitchen, opened the freezer, and calmly threw out the entire dinner. What the hell are you doing? You said it was cold, and I'm useless, so why waste it? He stared at me, for once, really stared. And I knew in that moment he could feel it. I was slipping out of his grasp. He had always mistaken my silence for surrender. But now, the woman he called useless was about to be applauded by a room full of strangers and loved by a son who finally saw her again. The smell of tomato basil always reminds me of that night. I was 25, newly married. I had spent 4 hours making dinner, Tom's favorite pasta, fresh bread, even a lemon tart from scratch. I lit candles, put on a nice dress. I wanted it to feel like something. He walked in late, loosened his tie, looked at the table, then at me. What's the occasion? I smiled. I just wanted to do something nice. For us. He sat down, tasted the sauce, and said, next time, use less garlic. It's overpowering. No, thank you. No smile. Just a mild correction, one that cut deeper than he'd ever understand. I excused myself and cried in the bathroom with the faucet running. That was the first time I learned how to cry quietly. It would not be the last. Flash forward. 2 days before my flight to New York, I stood at the sink rinsing a wine glass when Tom's phone buzzed on the counter. A message from contractor. Leslie, thinking of you. That weekend in Nashville. When can we do it again? I stared at the screen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, still, hollow, numb in the way a woman becomes when betrayal feels like old wallpaper, ugly, but no longer shocking. I put the glass down, went to my drawer, opened it, and pulled out the letter from the gallery, the notarized bank statement, and a signed contract I'd received just that morning for an exclusive licensing deal worth more than Tom's quarterly bonus. I placed them neatly in a folder, labeled it Proof of Life. And suddenly, something cracked open inside me. That night, I found myself looking through an old box in the attic. The kind you forget you saved because it hurts too much to remember. Inside, my college art awards. A photo of me at age 19, laughing so hard my eyes disappeared. And a voice message saved on an old flip phone from my father, recorded a few months before he died. You've always had a quiet strength, Margot. Don't ever let someone convince you that silence means weakness. It means wisdom. I sat there, knees to chest, sobbing into that dusty memory. Because that girl in the photo, she had fire, and I had let someone extinguish it. Another flashback, I was 6 weeks pregnant. We had been trying for months. I surprised Tom with the news on a Sunday morning, put the positive test in a little box with baby socks. He opened it, blinked, then said, "You really should have waited until I got this new position. Timing isn't great." 3 weeks later, I miscarried. He didn't come to the hospital, said he had a can't-miss meeting. He brought home dinner that night and said, well, at least it was early. It's not like we were attached yet. I never told anyone that story, not even Dean, because how do you explain the kind of loneliness that follows you into a room even when you're not alone? Back in the present, I pulled out a canvas and began painting the memory of that hospital room. It was the most painful piece I'd ever created. I called it Early Goodbye. I didn't care if anyone bought it. It wasn't for them. It was for her, the version of me who laid in that hospital bed, bleeding and blamed. The next morning, I received a call, the gallery director, his voice warm, professional, excited. Margot, the opening night RSVP list is already full, and a journalist from Art and Form wants to interview you for their Women Over 50 Redefining Art column. My heart beat against my ribs like it was trying to escape. "Are you comfortable using your real name?" he asked. I took a deep breath, looked at my reflection in the window, saw the faint outline of a woman I almost forgot existed. "Yes," I said. "I want the world to know exactly who I am." And just like that, the final wall came down. Have you ever kept something hidden? Not out of shame, but because the world just wasn't ready yet? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. The woman Tom left behind in that hospital room didn't die. She waited. And now? She was coming back to life, one brush stroke at a time. The gallery was in Soho. Small but prestigious, tucked between an artisan bakery and a bookstore that smelled like incense and old poetry. I stepped out of the car in a navy-wrapped dress and leather flats. Nothing flashy, but heads turned. It wasn't the outfit. It was the posture. For the first time in decades, I wasn't hunched behind someone else's name. I walked through the glass doors and was greeted by warm light, soft music, and people. Talking about me. Well, this one is devastating in the best way. Do you think she's been painting her whole life? Where has she been hiding all these years? I didn't speak right away, just listened and smiled. The gallery director spotted me and rushed over. "Margot," he whispered, half in awe, "they're obsessed with your work, and you." He introduced me to journalists, collectors, a woman who ran a museum in Montreal, all of them shaking my hand, asking about my technique, my inspiration, my story. I told the truth, but not all of it. "Sometimes pain has to leak out somewhere," I said. Mine found a brush. Midway through the night, someone tapped me on the shoulder. I turned and froze. It was Dean. My son. My boy. He smiled, awkward but proud, holding a single white rose. I thought this might be your color. I laughed through tears, hugged him so tightly he lost his breath. You came. Of course I did. I had to see the woman setting the world on fire. We sat in a corner of the gallery, sipping fizzy water and catching up like we hadn't missed years. I told him about the drawer, about A.M. Grayson, about the slow resurrection of who I used to be. He looked down at his shoes and said softly, I should have protected you more. I squeezed his hand. No, honey, I had to protect myself first. And I finally had. The next morning, I walked through Central Park alone, with a coffee in one hand and a notebook in the other. I wrote down 5 things I'd forgotten about myself. I love the smell of rain on pavement. I hum when I paint. I am good with money. I deserve softness. I am not finished. It felt like a spell. A resurrection prayer. I went back to the hotel, showered, and booked something I'd been dreaming about for months. A 4-week art retreat in Florence. Tom didn't know, and I wouldn't be asking permission. Back home, I found myself moving. Differently. I walked taller, bought myself flowers, sunflowers and calla lilies, changed the sheets to linen, lit candles at dinner even if I was eating alone. And slowly, I began packing small things into boxes. My personal belongings, keepsakes, my documents. When Tom noticed, he raised an eyebrow. You doing spring cleaning in October? I smiled. Just making space. He shrugged and went back to scrolling his phone. He had no idea that every drawer I emptied brought me closer to walking out of his life. One afternoon, I found him sitting at the kitchen island, grumbling about a dip in his stocks. I placed a check on the counter, payment from my gallery sales. He looked at it, confused. What's this? Something I earned. Thought I'd help with groceries this week. He blinked. I didn't know your little art thing was real money. I laughed. You didn't know a lot of things. I gave him a taste of what independence looked like, and he mistook it for generosity. But the truth was, I was already gone. He just hadn't noticed the silence in my goodbye. It happened on a Wednesday. One of Tom's old college buddies, Rick, was over for lunch. They were sitting out on the patio, bourbon in hand, complaining about the market and reminiscing about their so-called glory days. I was inside, slicing apples, half listening, half daydreaming about Florence. Then I heard it. Hey, Tom, Rick said with a chuckle. Saw a feature in some artsy magazine. Had your wife's name in it. Margot Grayson, right? Tom laughed, confused. What, like a PTA fundraiser? No, man, a gallery thing. Some artist named A.M. Grayson turned out to be your wife. Big deal. You didn't tell me she was famous now. The silence that followed was long, heavy. I stepped outside just in time to see Tom staring at his phone, scrolling furiously. His face blanched, jaw locked. Margot, he said sharply, not looking up. What the hell is this? I dried my hands on a towel, calm as still water. What's what? This article, Art and Form magazine. They're calling you a visionary, a quote-unquote force of femininity. What kind of crap is this? Looks like recognition, said softly. The kind you never gave me. Rick excused himself quickly, left his drink half full. That night, Tom exploded. You lied to me. I protected something sacred, I said. There's a difference. You hid money from me. Do you have any idea what kind of betrayal that is? You mean like Leslie? I said. He froze. I had never said her name out loud before. Oh yes, Tom, I know. Nashville. The little weekend you said was a real estate convention. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. That was nothing. I believe that's what you said about our marriage, too. He turned red. I should have known. All those nights you disappeared upstairs, acting mysterious, playing artist while I was out working for this family. Walked to the drawer that started it all, unlocked it, pulled out the folder marked Proof of Life, and placed it in front of him. "Margot, what is this?" "It's what you said I couldn't do. It's who you said I wasn't." He flipped through the documents, each one cutting deeper. My earnings, the licensing deal, the gallery contract, the bank account in my name only, and finally, at the very bottom, a copy of the legal separation paperwork, dated 3 months ago. "You're leaving me?" he whispered, almost too stunned to sound angry. "I left you a long time ago," I said. "Now I'm just doing the paperwork." His laugh was bitter. "You think you'll survive without me?" "I already am." The next week was a blur of slammed doors, icy silences, and passive-aggressive slights. He tried everything, bargaining, mocking, even guilt. "After all I've done for you?" "All you've done," I said, "is convince me I was nothing. But I finally learned how to see myself through my own eyes, not yours." He tried to access my accounts, called my bank, found out they were legally sealed. I had a financial advisor now, a lawyer, a team. He tried to charm me, even cooking dinner one night, his famous chicken marsala. I ate in silence, then said, "You're 3 years too late and 20 years behind." I reached out to Dean, told him everything. He came over the next evening and sat at the table with me while I signed the final documents. "You okay?" he asked. I paused. "Light." Tom wasn't home. He was golfing, or pretending to. Dean placed a hand over mine. "I'm proud of you, Mom. I wish I'd seen all this sooner." "You were a kid," I said. "You were supposed to believe in your father. That's what good sons do." He blinked back tears. I smiled and said the thing I'd waited decades to say. "It's okay. I finally believe in myself." He built a life where I was meant to be silent. But the moment I found my voice, his entire house of lies began to crumble around him. Tom didn't spiral right away. No, at first he performed. He started bringing home flowers, picking up groceries, asking how I slept. It was surreal, watching a man try to morph into a husband 20 years too late. But I wasn't fooled. I didn't argue. I didn't react. I simply continued, moving. I removed every personal item from the house in plain sight. Framed art, gone. Jewelry box, packed. My special spoons from Florence, wrapped and labeled. He watched, said nothing, until one night. He came into the kitchen and asked, "What if we tried again? Fresh start." I tilted my head. "You'd have to meet me where I am now, Tom," he smirked. "And where's that?" I leaned in close and whispered, "Out of your league." He didn't like that. The next morning, the kitchen chairs were slammed against the wall. The garbage was dumped onto the floor. I didn't flinch. I cleaned it up quietly and went back to reviewing contracts. He was crumbling. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. On a Sunday afternoon, I held my final exhibition at the local museum, a community event I'd arranged weeks ago. It wasn't glamorous, no critics. No press, but it was mine. I gave a speech in front of 30 women, ages 40 to 80. Most of them were retired teachers, nurses, grandmothers, widows. I told them, "This isn't a story about art. This is a story about being told you're not enough, and realizing that person was always afraid you'd find out the truth." Applause rang out, soft and real. That night, I slept alone for the first time in the guest bedroom. The next morning, I booked the movers. I waited until Tom left for his 3-day business trip. He didn't kiss me goodbye, just muttered something. About next quarter's numbers, perfect. By noon, I had every box labeled and loaded. The new apartment, mine in my name, was ready and waiting. I left behind only a few things. My wedding photo, turned face down on the mantel, a vase of wilting flowers he had brought home in a panic, and a handwritten note that read, "There is nothing louder than a woman who finally stopped begging to be heard." The building was quiet when I locked the door behind me. The key clicked with finality. My hands didn't shake. Outside, Dean was waiting with the car. He popped the trunk and smiled. "You sure you want to do this?" I looked at him, sunlight pouring onto his face. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. I moved into a sun-drenched loft with a small balcony and creaky floors that sang with every step. I filled it with art, candles, music, and space. So much space. Within 2 weeks, I hosted a rebirth dinner with a few women I'd met at my exhibition. We laughed for hours, drank wine, shared old dreams like secrets passed between teenage girls. One woman asked, "What finally gave you the courage?" I paused, looked down at my hands, ink-stained and alive, realizing that my silence was never peace. It was prison. Tom texted a week later, "You proved your point. You can come back now." I didn't respond. He called once. I let it ring. Eventually, he sent one last message. "I always knew you were hiding something. Just didn't think it would be this." That made me smile. Because he was right. I had been hiding something myself. He left for a business trip, expecting to come home to silence. Instead, he returned to an empty house and the echo of the woman he never bothered to know. It's strange how silence sounds different when you choose it. The loft is quiet in the mornings, but not lonely. I wake to soft sun on my cheeks, the smell of fresh coffee, and my little playlist of jazz and birdsong that plays while I stretch in the kitchen. I no longer wake to criticism, or tension, or the invisible weight of someone waiting to be served. Now, I wake to myself. 3 months after I left, my work was featured in Modern Femme, a nationally syndicated magazine spotlighting women who redefined their lives after 50. The headline, "Read From Forgotten to Fearless, The Rise of Margot Grayson." I framed the article and hung it in the hallway. A week later, I was invited to speak at a women's conference in Chicago. My keynote? The power of starting again, especially when they say you can't. I stood at that podium, looking into a sea of women with soft faces and hard stories, and I told them everything about the drawer, about the painting called Unburied, about the night my husband called me useless and the secret I kept hidden under lock and key. They cried. They clapped. One woman hugged me and whispered, "You told my story, and I didn't even know I needed it told." Dean visited last week. He brought wine and a pie from a bakery he found near his office. We sat on my balcony and watched the city lights flicker. "You know," he said, "you've changed." I smiled. "I hope so." "No," he said, "you used to shrink. Now you take up space, and it suits you." He paused, more serious. "Do you think Dad ever really knew who you were?" I looked at him, then out at the night. "No, but that was never my fault. Tom never apologized. Not really. He sent a birthday card in January. No return address, just 5 words. Hope you're happy. You won." But this wasn't a contest, and I didn't win anything. I reclaimed something. I still have that drawer. I brought it with me when I moved. The little locking chest that used to hold secrets now holds mementos. A print of my first sold piece. The gallery invitation from New York. My father's old voicemail saved on a USB and the Florence retreat brochure, now dog-eared and marked completed. Sometimes I open it just to remind myself there was a time when I thought I had nothing left. And still, I bloomed. I recently donated a collection of prints to a local women's shelter. Each one was framed with a quote etched beneath, "You are not broken. You were never held right." A woman stopped me afterward and said, "When I look at your art, I feel like I'm meeting myself again." And I knew that was the point all along. If you could go back and tell your younger self one truth she needed to hear, what would it be? Share it in the comments. You never know who needs your words. The man who said I was useless gave me the greatest gift without knowing it. He reminded me that my worth was never his to define. Sometimes I wonder how many women are still standing at their kitchen sink, rinsing dishes and swallowing dreams. How many are walking ghosts, alive only in service of someone else's comfort? How many are waiting to be seen, even if just for a moment? I lived like that for years, not because I was weak, but because I was taught to believe that love meant sacrifice. That silence was noble. That being good meant being small. It wasn't until I began painting again that I realized silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's a slow erasure, and I was done disappearing. I no longer measure my worth by what I do for someone else. I don't ask permission before I take up space. I don't dim the room to make others feel brighter. Now I light the candle. I open the window. I fill the page. The loft is filled with laughter now, some from me, some from friends, and some from the soft joy of knowing I've made it back to myself. There are days when I still get quiet, days when I remember the woman who used to flinch. When the garage door opened, who made herself small during dinner, who flinched when her own name was said with annoyance. I sit with her sometimes. I paint her face. I hold her hand, and I say, "Look what we became." The gallery in Florence sent me a photo last week. My painting, Early Goodbye, now hangs in a restored 17th century villa just outside of Lucca. They said a widow bought it after seeing her own grief in the shadows. I wept for her, and for me, and for the little girl who used to sketch on her. Bedroom walls with crayons when no one was looking. She knew, even then. She knew that beauty could grow from hurt. I don't think of Tom often. He exists somewhere in the past, like an old photograph left in a drawer you never open anymore, and I no longer need to prove anything to him, because every time someone tells me, "Your art made me feel less alone," I am reminded, I won. Not the kind of win you shout about, the kind you whisper to yourself when the world goes still. To the woman watching this who feels like she's too far gone. To the one who gave everything and was left with crumbs. To the one afraid to start over at 30, 50, 70, you are not done. You are not useless. You are not too late. You are not broken. You are unused potential, waiting for a canvas that's finally yours. He thought I was just the woman in the background, but I became the masterpiece he never saw coming.